first video about building bait boats, I talked about planning and preparing and explained the power system and the signaling system that we are about to build. In this second part of this series, I will explain to you how I prepare my pixhawk before I build it into the boat. And by following these steps, I will eliminate a whole lot of problems later on in the build. If you want to follow me and do the same as I do when I prepare the pixhawk, then you need to have installed Mission Planner before and then prepare the following equipment. You'll be needing a micro USB cable, you'll need your pixhawk, you need a GPS for your pixhawk, and later in the video we're also going to need our radio receiver and radio transmitter. We're going to start with installing firmware. So plug that USB cable into your PC, plug the other end, the micro USB end, into the pixhawk, and wait for the pixhawk to start. Even though firmware installation has to begin with state disconnected, I'm going to test anyway if it can connect automatically. If it cannot connect automatically, well, then the firmware installation will fail anyway. So I'm going to connect now automatically. You see here it found COM port 4. And then just wait and see that it properly connects. And when it's done, we can disconnect later when we need to install our firmware. But we're also going to do another check once it is properly connected. Parameters are now completely downloaded. And if you look at the heads-up display, top left, you see we have a problem. It says armed and fail-safe and everything. The problem with an armed pixhawk is that we simply cannot install firmware. So I have to correct this. I'm going to search for arming require. And when I do, I find that arming require is now 0. And if you see to the right here, well, 0 is disabled, so we need to make sure it's set to 1. So I'm going to click here and change the value to 1, and then save that parameter so I can start the pixhawk and have it disarmed. It's really important. The next tip here is that I have used an old pixhawk. It's been used in another boat. It has some old firmware on it. And when I upgrade, I want all parameters to have their default value. You don't have to do this if you have a brand new pixhawk, but in my case, I will go back to the config and I'll make sure that all parameters are reset to their original value, default values. I'm going to click that, confirm that I'm sure I want to do it. And the pixhawk will now reboot and it will be disconnected, and I'm actually ready to move ahead with firmware installation. As the firmware installation requires the pixhawk to be disconnected, I'm not going to click here now. Instead, I'm going to move over to the setup and continue with firmware installation. After clicking setup, we click install firmware. And then you select Rover. If you don't have any very good reason not to install the latest software, then select this one and move along. If you want to use the parameter file I will share together with this video, then instead you need to download a particular version of the firmware. Then we hit install legacy firmware, and from that we download firmwares. Hitting that button, you get straight to the download firmware web page. Scroll down and find Rover, and then scroll down and find the version that you want to use. In our case, our parameter file needs to be used with 4.1, so we're going to do the latest 4.1.5. And if you use a regular pixhawk, it's typically the FMUV3 file you need to select. In this chapter, you need to download at least the Rover APG, and you store it on a directory of your own choosing. And when you've done that, you head back to Mission Planner and you click Load Custom Firmware. And you select that file that you already downloaded, and you're good to go. I have speeded things up a little here. First it will scan for COM ports after reading the hex file, and then it will connect. It's going to do an erase, and finally, when it has erased whatever was there before, it's going to program with a new firmware. And when it's completed, you're good. Now let's prepare for radio calibration. So I have the Pixoc here. The power is off. You can see no lighting here. GPS doesn't blink. And here's the receiver for my SkyDroid. And to the left, that's our connection port. I'm going to connect just one cable, and it's going to go into the RC in port. So let's start there. So to the left port. So, and then we have the GPS. It has two cables, one for the GPS and one for the compass. The GPS goes in here, GPS, and the compass goes into the I2C port. Good. Now let's connect to power. And everything seems good. And finally, let's power on our T10. No arrow blinking. And if we have a look here, we also have a green LED here. So everything is good. As the radio is now set up, let's connect back to Mission Planner and then head over to the instructions, where we see that we have connected it, we have installed firmware, we have connected the radio receiver, and now we're going to do the radio calibration. At the radio, click Setup. Under Mandatory Hardware, you'll find Radio Calibration there. Radio calibration is really straightforward. You just click Calibrate Radio, and then you move all your sticks and all your switches on your transmitter, so it learns the midpoints, the high points, and the low points for all of the channels. And once that's done, well, then you can drive properly also in manual mode, even with the autopilot built in. When I did radio calibration now, I noticed that I have a problem with my channel 8. It doesn't go below 1500, which is kind of a problem, probably caused by a setting on the remote. Is an old remote. I'm just using it again. It's not a big problem because I'm going to use channel 8 for a mode channel anyway, so I'm just clicking when done. The last message is really telling you to make sure that everything is now put into the middle. I have a couple of wheels here on my remote, so I slowly push those back into the middle position, and then I finally click OK. A message pops up stating the resulting values. You don't have to save anything, just click OK and we are done with radio calibration. Next task is to set up some modes. We're going to set up a mode for channel 8, and we're going to select the 3-position switch for it later. It's important that you at least one mode is manual. It will help when you build your bait boat, and it also is really convenient afterwards when you have no GPS position and need to be able to drive the boat anyway. To set up modes, click Config, and on the top select Flight Modes. On the top of the page here, you can see that the current mode channel is 8, and it's currently in the middle position. If you need to change that channel to another channel, go into the parameters in the config screen and change mode channel. Since I only have a 3-position switch, I am going to select a pair 2 times for low, 2 times for medium, and 2 times for high PWM value. And I'm going to select RTL, automatic, and finally leave that in manual. I'll click Save Modes and the job is done. The modes are now set. We're going to move forward and we're going to set 3 parameters, out of which 2 are really important to make boat building much easier. Let's start with frame class. Standard value is 1. If you make it 2, then Pixoc will treat it as a boat. Just copy here or type it in, move over. I'm going to paste it in here. You see that the current value is 1. I'm going to change it into a value of 2. And when I'm done, I'm going to write the parameters. I'm going to save each parameter one at a time here. Moving back to my cheat sheet, board safety enable. Its standard value is 1, meaning you need that safety button in order to arm the Pixoc. Let's not use that arming button. Let's change the value into 0, and then we don't need that arming button at all. You don't need to install it. I'm going to paste it here. You see it's 1. We're going to set it as 0, meaning disabled, and we're going to write that parameter value as well. Heading back then to our cheat sheet again, failsafe action is 2. That's typically a hold, making it impossible to test your motors when you build a boat. Let's do it as a 0 instead. Copy that, move over to Mission Planner, paste it in, and here we see that the failsafe action is 2. That's hold. We make it 0, write that parameter, and now it's much easier to continue with our boat build. Moving back to the cheat sheet, arming require, I've marked it as red text. There's a reason for it. Arming require at 0 will block firmware upgrades, and it also blocks compass calibration. So I love to have it at 0, but I will do it later. And finally, on the list, we also have the HRS orientation. That's all about how you orient the Pixoc. If it sits flat, it's a 0. If I mount it on the left side of my boat, then it's rolled over 90 degrees, meaning a value of 16 when we use Mission Planner to set it. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to keep it as 0 for now and then change it later when I mount it into the boat. Let's move on to the final set of parameters that we're going to set. We're going to adjust some servo settings. Servo settings we set in the setup screen. And below radio calibration we find servo output. So we select that. And here we're going to change a lot of parameters. Hang on. First of all, the default setup is for a Rover is for a throttle and a rudder. Channel 1 being steering, channel 3 being throttle. Since I have a 2-motor setup, so-called skid steering, I need to make sure that it's throttle left and throttle right instead. So let's start with making sure we got throttle left on channel 1. And then we got, for channel 3, throttle right. Having some problems here to find it. It was all on the top. Come on. Fine. Now, if you look at all of the other channels, they are now disabled. And what it means is that if you move a stick or a switch on your remote, the signal will not come through. So we're going to change that for all of the other channels, with the exception of channel 8, until RC pass-through. So whatever you do on your remote, using manual mode, using switches, everything will be passed through and you're not going to have any problems. Channel 8 I will leave be, channel 9 and channel 10, that's all channels I have, and you don't have to save anything. Everything is now set and you're good to go. As a side note here, I see there are no green marking on channel 9 and channel 10, probably because I have an old firmware. As I'm not going to use channel 9 and channel 10, I don't care. Now we're heading into the final part of the preparation. That's calibration of the accelerometer and the compass. You actually don't have to do it before you install everything in the boat. You can do it afterwards, and you should do it afterwards, even no matter what. But I'm going to do it before anyway, because I think it's easier to understand that everything works when I've done it up front. So let's just dive into it. Accelerometer calibration we find in the setup menu. We're going to perform the 2 steps on the top, starting from the top. The first one is to set all directions right on the boat. And as it says there, place vehicle level and then click. So we're going to do exactly that. And then we put the boat on the right side, on the left side. Hold it steady and then click. Then flip the boat over to the right side, hold it steady and click. Put the nose down and hold it steady and click once more. Move so the bottom is down, hold the nose up, hold it steady and click. Then put the boat on the back and click a final time. And we're done. Now put your boat in the normal position again and click to set the level. And that finalizes the accelerometer calibration. That was easy. Compass calibration is also done from the setup menu. You click compass, then you click start, and then what you do is to rotate the boat 360 degrees with each end of the boat pointing towards north. So you can start with nose to the north, and then you twist the boat 360 degrees. Then you can do the back, then you can do the side on the left, side on the right, the bottom and the top. As you see here now, I have both compasses enabled. Compass number 2 is not tagged as external, so that's inside my Pixhawk, while the other is external. And I was not successful during the first round, so I have to do it once more. And just keep on working, and in not too long, then we will have a success. All right, still going on. Keep on twisting the boat 360 degrees with each of the 6 sides of the boat heading north. And you can also point it slightly down to the floor. So I think I'm going to be successful now. Hang on. Yes. And once compass calibration is done, you need to reboot the autopilot. So let's do that. And now we are completed. Reboot, okay, done. Since our Pixhawk is still connected to Mission Planner, let's do one final step to make sure it can also connect to CarPilot Pro. So we go into the config menu, we select parameters, and we will search for serial 1 protocol, which is the setting for the telemetry port number 1. So we click into the search and serial 1 underscore, and then we'll find the protocol. It's currently set to 2. We need to change it to 1 to use Maverick 1 instead. So we change the value to 1, we write parameters, and now we are finally done. So that's the end of this video. We've gone through quite a few steps. It took us approximately 20 minutes, and we now have Pixhawk readily prepared to be put into the boat, and we should have no problems to continue the further setup. So in the next video, we're going to move on with other components that we are putting into our boat. Thank you.